You wake up every morning with a weight on your chest, not the crushing kind that comes from failure, but the kind that whispers, "You're not enough yet." You stretch, you read, you meditate, you drink your filtered water, and somewhere in between the cold shower and the dopamine detox, you wonder when you'll finally become a version of yourself that feels worthy of peace. But the bar keeps moving. You tick boxes, repeat mantras, and inhale self-help like oxygen. Yet for all your effort, the sense of incompleteness only sharpens. You're not just chasing improvement, you're being hunted by it. You start to realize this isn't growth, it's pursuit, and you are both the predator and the prey. Who sold you this dream of perpetual refinement? What if becoming better has become the most elegant way to avoid becoming real? In a world that celebrates optimization as virtue, you must ask, how did the ideal of self-mastery transform into an existential treadmill? And deeper still, what if the very need to improve is the sickness itself? Arthur Schopenhauer saw it early. He wrote not about the thrill of growth, but the futility of desire. He didn't offer comfort. He offered clarity, an unflinching gaze into the abyss of human striving. To him, the more we chase, the more we suffer. To exist is to want, and to want is to suffer. This was not pessimism, it was diagnosis. But how do you tell society raised on goals, progress, and hustle that improvement might be the cage? You scroll past words like manifestation, grind set, level up, healing. You see influencers in perfect lighting speaking softly about becoming your highest self. And you wonder quietly, what if the pursuit of my highest self is what's killing me the fastest? Because deep down, you know the truth. You're not getting better. You're getting quieter, smaller, tighter. Your shadow grows hungrier, your joy more performative. And still you keep going, hoping that maybe the next book, the next program, the next morning ritual will finally silence that voice inside that says, not yet, not now, not enough. But here's the disturbing part. The system doesn't want you to be healed. It wants you to be chasing healing. It wants you tired, obsessed, striving for a wholeness you were told you lack. And in the name of discipline and growth, you become obedient to an invisible God whose only commandment is, do more. So let's ask what no algorithm dares to promote. What if your addiction to growth is just your fear wearing new clothes? What if the version of you who isn't constantly evolving is not a failure, but a human being finally waking up? This is not a rejection of becoming. It's a confrontation with why we become. Because beneath the self-help, beneath the endless striving, beneath the noise of motivational quotes echoing in empty hearts, there is something primal, something Schopenhauer dared to name, the will, that blind, insatiable force within us that wants and wants and wants, but never asks why. So now you sit with a question that cuts deeper than any morning routine ever will. What if your need to be better is the very thing that's keeping you broken? Let that question burn. Because once you see it, once you feel it, you'll never look at your self-improvement journey the same way again. Let's go deeper. You were not born chasing self-improvement. You were born crying, breathing naked, raw, and completely whole. There was no shame in your hunger, no guilt in your demands. You didn't ask yourself how to optimize your sleep cycle or upgrade your inner child. You simply existed, without branding it as a performance. So, where did the fracture begin? Where does a being once content in its own being learn that being is never enough? The answer is not in the mirror. It's in the system that taught you to stare at one. Carl Jung warned that our lives are often guided by forces we refuse to see. The unconscious, the shadow, the persona. He believed we wear masks to meet the expectations of others. But over time, we forget their masks. We confuse performance with personality. We think the persona is the path to love. And what does modern society reward more than performance? Aesthetics, productivity, potential. From your earliest years, your value was tied not to your essence, but to your usefulness. You were praised for good grades, polite silence, and the ability to suppress emotion for the comfort of others. This praise planted a seed. You are lovable only when you're improving, only when you're becoming something better than what you are. That seed grew into a doctrine. You are a project, not a person, not a presence. A project, And projects are never done. So you enter the psychological loop. Every version of you is just another draft. Every success, an appetizer. You're applauded for progress, but never allowed peace, because peace isn't productive. And in a world driven by capital, even your soul must become a commodity. Here's where Schopenhauer enters like a shadow behind the light. While modern culture chants growth is everything, Schopenhauer whispers the opposite. Growth is suffering in disguise. He called it the will, an invisible, endless force at the core of all life. The will wants. It doesn't care what, it simply wants. And because it cannot be satisfied, suffering becomes a natural state of existence. You are not a seeker of truth, he argued. You are a vessel of the will, tricked into believing that fulfillment is around the next corner. But the moment you grasp what you wanted, desire shifts again, just far enough to keep you moving, just close enough to convince you it's worth chasing. Sound familiar? That new diet, that 6 a.m. journal, that guru with the $200 course. None of them satisfy. They pacify. They delay the confrontation with the terrifying possibility that maybe there's no version of yourself that will finally make you feel at peace. This is a trap, not because growth is wrong, but because it becomes religion. Improvement is no longer a tool. It becomes identity. We are not healing to be free. We are healing to be good enough to keep going. You've been conditioned to see yourself as a blueprint waiting for construction, not a mystery waiting to be witnessed. And the entire architecture of society benefits from this illusion. A person who believes they're always lacking will buy more, work more, strive more, obey more. They will look outside themselves for answers. They will kneel the altar of productivity apps and self-help books, always feeling behind, always pushing forward, never asking who set the finish line in the first place. You become your own tyrant, ruling over yourself with the whip of potential. And the tragedy? You think it's self-love. That's the most seductive part of this trap. It cloaks itself in virtue. It doesn't scream, you're broken. It whispers, you could be even better. That whisper becomes gospel. Improvement becomes worship. And you bow to the fantasy of who you might become, while ignoring the reality of who you already are. Jean-Paul Sartre called it bad faith, the act of lying to yourself in order to escape the burden of freedom. It's easier to chase an illusion of perfection than it is to sit in the discomfort of your own presence. Self-improvement gives you direction, but also distraction. You think you're evolving, but you're just avoiding the silence, avoiding the stillness, avoiding the frightening possibility that the self cannot be perfected because it was never meant to be. In chasing a better you, you become a stranger to yourself. And still, you keep running because everyone else is running too. You scroll social media and see polished routines, gym selfies, morning rituals, glistening wellness. You see people who seem to have arrived. But what if they're just better at hiding their hunger? What if they too are trapped in theater of improvement, smiling through exhaustion, pushing through burnout, afraid that stopping would mean collapsing? Because that's the real fear, isn't it? Not that you'll never arrive, but that you'll stop running and realize there was no destination at all. You have to face your life without the distraction of fixing it. You have to feel the grief of how long you've abandoned yourself in the name of becoming. And you'd have to ask the question you were never taught to ask. If I don't need to improve, who am I now? But don't answer that yet. Because before we can break free, we need to see what this trap is really doing to us. We've traced its roots. Now, let's walk through its damage. You thought you were healing, but you were just upgrading the mask. You learned the right words, boundaries, alignment, emotional regulation. You spoke of shadow work, self-awareness, trauma cycles. You meditated, you fasted, you journaled. And yet, something inside still felt hollow, as if the more you fixed yourself, the more fragmented you became. This isn't failure. It's the natural outcome of a system that confuses being more with being better. Because when self-improvement becomes survival, it quietly rewires the way you see everything. Your body, your emotions, your worth. The trap doesn't just shape your actions. It reshapes your nervous system. It infects your biology with the belief that stillness is laziness, rest is regression, and contentment is weakness. You are not just mentally exhausted. You are neurologically trained to be at war with your own enoughness. Here's what most people never realize. Your brain doesn't distinguish between the pressure to survive and the pressure to be better. Cortisol still rises. Fight or flight still engages. You're not meditating, you're bracing. This is why you can feel burnt out by your healing journey. You're trapped in what neuroscientists call a high-effort coping loop. It's when the mind convinces the body to keep pushing, because stopping would mean collapse. And every time you improve, your brain rewards you with a brief hit of dopamine, then resets the target. It's not growth, it's addiction. But society doesn't just permit this loop, it monetizes it. Take a look at the $11 billion self-help industry. It thrives not on helping you arrive, but on convincing you you're still far from home. You're sold routines, rituals, courses, challenges, all framed as empowerment, all functioning as reminders that you're not there yet. Wellness becomes a treadmill with golden rails, luxurious, glowing, and completely immobile. And the people around you, they applaud the performance. They like your consistency. They admire your discipline. But no one notices the quiet grief of someone who no longer recognizes themselves outside of progress. No one sees the identity death that happens when your entire life becomes a resume of emotional development. Eventually, you stop asking, "How do I feel?" and start asking, "How can I grow from this?" Even pain becomes content. Even heartbreak must become a catalyst. Even breakdowns are now breakthroughs. Not because you process them, but because you post about them with the right caption. But here's the tragedy underneath. Self-improvement kills intimacy. When you see yourself as a project, you begin to see others the same way. People become mirrors for your own work, tools for growth, triggers for healing. You don't relate. You analyze. You don't connect. You manage. Love becomes something to optimize. Friendship becomes something to navigate. Everything is framed around your development. This is not evolution. It's emotional sterilization. Carl Jung warned of this when he spoke of inflation, a state where the ego attaches to a spiritual or psychological ideal and expands beyond its natural place. In chasing the ideal self, you bypass the humanity of your current one. You become a ghost wearing a self-help hoodie. And when people finally say you've changed, it's not always a compliment. Sometimes it's a cry, because they missed a version of you who didn't filter every experience through a lens of optimization. Let's go even deeper. The trap of endless self-improvement doesn't just impact individuals. It silently reshapes society. A culture obsessed with growth will always devalue contentment. A world built on constant updates, versions, likes, upgrades, will always make stillness feel like failure. We see this everywhere. In the workplace, where burnout is disguised as ambition. In relationships, where vulnerability is replaced by polished communication techniques. In schools, where children are praised not for wonder, but for productivity. Even rest must now be justified. You can't nap, you must bio-optimize recovery. You can't read, you must intellectually stimulate neuroplasticity. You can't simply be, you must become. Every moment must serve a purpose. And if it doesn't, it becomes unbearable. But here's what no one tells you. The trap isn't made of walls. It's made of mirrors. You can leave at any time, but you'd have to confront the version of yourself who believes that peace must be earned. You'd have to let go of the identity built on potential. You'd have to disappoint the persona that kept you safe, liked, admired. And that feels like death, because it is a kind of death. The death of the self you built to survive a world that profits from your insecurity. But until that death happens, you remain stuck, improving endlessly but never arriving. So now ask yourself, when was the last time you did something that didn't improve you? When was the last time you rested without guilt, loved without strategy, breathed without needing it to be mindful? When was the last time you were simply you, unoptimized, unfiltered, untouchable by improvement? Because that version of you still exists. Buried beneath the upgrades, the tracking apps, the inspirational content, the coaching sessions. It waits patiently like silence behind noise. But to find it, you'll have to rebel. You'll have to walk away from the cult of becoming. And that rebellion starts now. You were never broken. Let that echo. not in the polite tone of a self-love affirmation, but in the raw silence that follows grief. Because what you've lost wasn't your worth, it was your permission to exist without performance. And if there's one truth your old self could never bear, it's this. You don't need to become anything to be worthy of rest. But saying that isn't enough. You need to unlearn the laws of a world that taught you otherwise. You need rebellion, not the loud, flashy kind, but the soft, sacred kind. The rebellion of refusal. Refusing to strive. Refusing to optimize. Refusing to chase worth like a dog chasing its tail. And to do that, you must confront the parasite in your psyche. The belief that your value lies in what you can one day become. Schopenhauer didn't preach hope. He offered truth, and truth in its purest form is a blade. He said that the will, that blind inner drive to want more, to be more, to do more, can never be satisfied. And thus, happiness is not found in feeding the will. It's found in escaping it, not in victory, but in abstinence. He saw liberation not in conquest, but in surrender, not striving, but stepping back, not healing to become more palatable, but withdrawing from a very need to be fixed. So how do you break free? You begin with an act of heresy in the temple of progress. You stop, not forever, not recklessly, but intentionally. You stop in the middle of your routine. You stop reading the next chapter. You stop fixing the version of yourself you believe is still unworthy. And you ask, who am I when I'm not improving? Sit with the discomfort, the guilt, the itch to be productive. That's the programming surfacing. That's the ghost of the persona dying slowly. Let it die. This is what Carl Jung meant when he spoke of individuation, becoming who you actually are rather than who you were conditioned to be. And to do that, you must integrate the parts of yourself you've disowned in your quest for greatness. The insecure one, the angry one, the lazy one, the one who rests, the one who doesn't read productivity books or wake up at 5 a.m. They are not your enemies. They are your missing pieces. To reject them is to reject yourself. To welcome them is to become whole. Because the truth is, you don't become whole by polishing the parts of you that shine. You become whole by reclaiming the parts you left behind in the name of growth. And that is the rebellion. It's the moment you wake up and realize you're not a project, not a machine, not a personal brand. You are a being. You are allowed to exist without being exceptional. You are allowed to enjoy life without extracting value from it. You are allowed to sit still and call it sacred. Let go of the narratives that tell you peace must be earned. Let go of the mentors who feed your addiction to potential. Let go of the algorithm's echo chamber of more, more, more. Instead, choose silence. Choose slowness. Choose a different rhythm, one not driven by desire, but by depth. Read slowly. Walk without tracking steps. Create art that no one sees. Take naps without guilt. Listen, not to learn, but to feel. Speak, not to teach, but to connect. Start measuring life not in milestones, but in moments. Because real transformation doesn't happen when you conquer yourself. It happens when you meet yourself without agenda. And it doesn't mean you'll never grow again. It means growth is no longer your God. You grow because you want to, not because you fear what happens if you stop. You grow from love, not lack. That shift alone is liberation. Even Viktor Frankl, a man who survived Auschwitz, warned against the obsession with self-improvement as a means to feel alive. He wrote that meaning is not found in looking inward endlessly, but in reaching beyond yourself, toward love, purpose, presence. True growth is accidental. He said, an echo of something deeper. So here's a radical idea. What if your next evolution isn't becoming more disciplined, but more gentle? What if your breakthrough is another achievement, but finally allowing yourself to be human? The world will call you lazy. Let them. Your own mind will panic. Let it, because there is nothing more powerful than a person who has stopped running, stood still in the chaos, and declared, I am enough, here, as I am, now. No goal, no future self, just you, breathing, feeling, being. This is not the end of the journey. It's the start of a life that no longer needs to justify itself. The rebellion is quiet, but it is holy, and it is yours. What if this was the final illusion? that you ever needed to become anything at all, that all the striving, all the suffering, all the self-improvement was simply your soul forgetting it was already whole. This is the moment where the chase ends, not with fireworks, not with enlightenment, not with applause, but with silence, with the unbearable softness of now. Schopenhauer believed life was a cycle of blind desire, the will endlessly demanding, never satisfied. He argued that the only way to free yourself was not through indulgence and not through improvement, but through negation, a conscious turning away from desire itself. But what he meant was not nihilism. It was transcendence. Because the most radical act in a world obsessed with becoming is to be still, to be flawed, to be unfinished, unrefined, unproductive, and perfectly enough. You see, the trap of endless self-improvement is not just about suffering. It's about self-abandonment masquerading as growth. It's about turning your life into a performance to win a peace that was never meant to be earned. But there's a truth more haunting than all the productivity apps and motivational quotes combined. You were already the thing you were trying to become. You didn't need more steps. You needed stillness. You didn't need to evolve. You needed to remember, because the soul doesn't heal in motion. It heals in presence. It heals the moment you stop treating yourself like a problem. It heals the moment you look into the mirror, not to measure progress, but to witness yourself, the same way you might witness a sunset or a dying star, without judgment, without improvement, without needing anything to change. That is the ultimate rebellion, not changing your life, but seeing it clearly for the first time. The world will never stop demanding that you evolve. Your mind will whisper that you're falling behind. Even your body, addicted to the rhythm of hustle, will resist the stillness. But in the quiet, you will begin to see it. There is no finish line, no final version, no highest self waiting in the wings. There is only this self, the tired self, the grieving self, the confused, broken, tender, wise self. And it doesn't need your improvement. It needs your intimacy. You were never supposed to perfect yourself. You were supposed to meet yourself. So sit, not because you earned rest, but because you never had to earn anything. Lie down, not to recover from more striving, but to finally feel what it's like to exist without purpose. Let go, not because you've given up, but because you finally understand the struggle was never with your flaws. It was with your refusal to accept your own humanity. And now, there is nothing left to fix. You've walked through the trap. You've seen its machinery, felt its weight, watched its seduction. And now you stand on the other side, not healed, but whole, not perfected, but free. There will be days when you forget again. That's okay. The will is patient. It will whisper again. It will tempt you again. But now you know its name. And sometimes, that's all it takes to break a spell. Let the others chase their best self. Let the world keep running. You are no longer in the race. You've chosen stillness. You've chosen return. And in that return, you'll find something no self-help book ever taught you. Peace is not a destination. It is the quiet miracle of being here, unimproved and undeniably alive,